A lot of the customers that come to us looking for a workforce planning product, often one of the biggest challenges that they're talking about is the inability to forecast. And so not knowing, how many pursuits should we be going after given the capacity we're expecting to have 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2, 3 years from now? And are we pursuing the right projects?
It surprises me that it's a reality, which is that 42% of GCs can't take on new projects because of workforce constraints. I mean, imagine you have the demand, but you can't answer it. And I know anecdotally from Lauren's travels, this to be true as well. But I don't know if it's surprising as much as just that seems like, how can you have getting demand is the hard part, you'd think, right? In running a business. But they have the demand. You talked about data centers before the call. Oh, and the demand is there.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode. In construction, precision matters. Every budget line, every schedule, every document. But too often, project data is scattered across tools and departments, creating risky silos. That's where ArcDesk comes in. ArcDesk is the all-in-one construction management platform designed to connect your entire project operation, from opportunity through to tender, all the way to handover. With real-time dashboards, cost control, scheduling, procurement, and document management in one place, ArcDesk gives you complete visibility and control. Trusted by contractors, subcontractors, and asset owners worldwide, ArcDesk has powered landmark projects from shopping centers to Europe's tallest buildings. If you're ready to reduce risk, protect your margins, and deliver projects with confidence, discover ArcDesk today and visit arcdesk.com, that's ARCH desk.com, and see how leading firms are building smarter with ArcDesk.
I never know until I hit record. Okay, Lauren, Kevin, thank you for joining us. So maybe actually it would be good for you to, as there's two of you here, to introduce yourself before we hit the road with this. I was going to hit you with a hard question to start, but I'll warm you up. So, Lauren, you go first.
Hi, my name's Lauren Lake, and I'm the co-founder of Bridgit. And Bridgit is a construction software company focused on workforce planning for the industry.
Awesome.
You can tell how pro she is. That's going to be way better than my intro.
Hey, Kevin, you've been on here before, man, so I expect you to nail this.
So Kevin Ferguson, I run ACO Product Marketing, a product marketing consultancy, and have been working with Bridgit for about a year now, and work with AEC software companies in the space.
You must be doing something right then.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Lots of things.
Nice to hear. Okay, Lauren. So, yeah, this is not a lie, but we speak to a lot of people we do speak to a lot of people within the construction technology industry. And when it comes to workforce planning, we often hear that Bridgit is the solution. So what's the secret? How did you do it?
I don't know if there's any secret. I think it's a mix of probably just back to our roots, focused on customer research. My business partner and I, so Mallory and I, when we started the company, it was really focused on finding problems and figuring out what we could bring to the industry to solve those problems. And I think that is what has allowed us to build the product that we have today, focused on workforce planning. It's been so focused on the customer feedback that we've gotten, really focusing in on our target market and making sure that we're building features that resonate with the industry and that solve real business pain. And I think that has been the cornerstone to the last number of years of developing and growing the business. I think the other piece I mentioned just briefly there is focus. I think we have been a really focused company. We have spent, as a small company with limited resources, you have to really hone in on what you're trying to do. So I think we've had a very clear strategy, and we've been able to align a really amazing team, of course, that we have around us on that strategy so that we're making the decisions and putting our resources in the place where we think we're going to have the most impact.
Nice.
Hi,
Oh,
Lauren. So, what are the pain points within workforce planning that your customers would agree with you on?
Yeah, so when we first heard this challenge of workforce planning, it was actually from Alberici. We had a meeting with their CTO at the time, and he brought up this challenge around workforce planning. He had been asked for many years by his team to find a workforce planning product and just couldn't find anything specific for the construction industry. There's obviously resource management products for different industries, for healthcare, for hospitality, but there wasn't anything for construction from what he could tell. And this was interesting. And so we started asking questions. Well, what do you do now? You have thousands of employees. How are you managing those people? And he essentially told this kind of story and process around the team getting together once a week. They tracked everything through spreadsheets, plus a whiteboard. So looking at all of the different people, all of the different projects, and trying to match up who's coming available, who is based where, who has the right skill set and experience to take on which jobs, and how are we going to shuffle the people that we have across the projects that we have nationwide, and just how manual that whole process was and how much they relied on this institutional knowledge from a few people within the company that would have had, many years of experience and really knew the people and the projects inside and out. And then kind of the second piece to that was that it was really difficult for them to actually pull insights from that workforce plan. So what is our utilization rate? That's actually something that was really difficult for contractors to be able to determine looking at their spreadsheet. What's our supply and demand? Are we in a position where 6 months from now we're going to have too many people given the number of projects we are pursuing? Or are we going to be in the inverse situation of that? So a lot of the challenges that we saw early on really came back to this manual process that really made it difficult for people to make data-driven decisions around their workforce and have the visibility that they needed across divisions. And then this was interesting because we heard this problem initially, and we thought that was really interesting, but we wanted to go validate that, of course, with other contractors. And so we set up a bunch of meetings with other kind of top ENR 400 companies to understand how they did their workforce planning. We sort of thought, well, surely someone must have figured this out. And it was very obvious as we talked to more and more people. The answer was always Excel, whiteboards, in some cases, a homegrown solution, typically built on top of, some sort of spreadsheet database. And so it became pretty clear, I'd say within the first, 5 to 10 conversations with these leading contractors that there was a huge gap here in being able to bring a more modern solution.
Kevin, I will ask you a question in a minute, but Lauren, I remember we caught up some months ago, and you told me this incredible story about the Harvard, your time at Harvard. I'm not sure, I can't remember the exact like what your role at Harvard was. Did you attend a business school?
So I did not go to Harvard. um,
I might just
uh,
made that up.
I did not go to Harvard, but what we do have is we have a Harvard business school case study written about Bridgit,
Okay, here we go. I'm on the right
which
line somewhere.
which has been such an incredible experience. So Mallory and I have been able to go for the last couple of years to Harvard to their MBA program and present the Bridgit case study. And sort of the case goes through a bunch of questions. The students deliberate in terms of what they would have done if they were in our shoes. And then we are there, Mallory and I, to give sort of the part C of the case and explain what actually happened. So it's been a really great experience to be exposed to that. I guess we can kind of live vicariously through the Harvard students since that is not an experience either of us have, but it's been really interesting to be part of it.
And did you, if I recall correctly, you said that the Bridget story resonated the most when people were asked to put their hands up at the end. Bridget story resonated the most out of
We've
all of
heard
them.
that from a number of students that the Bridgit case study has come up the most in their opinion when
Why?
they
What
talk
was so
about the
cool about
cases.
it?
I think this is just my sort of the feedback that I've heard and sort of my take on it. I think our story, which is really around sort of the early days, we were college students when Mallory and I first met, and we started without any sort of idea other than construction is interesting and it seems like there's an opportunity for more technology. And we just started crane hunting. That's what we called it, driving around, looking for cranes. We're Canadian, so we would show up on these job sites with Timbits. So, Tim Hortons
Timbits.
donut
Oh,
holes
okay.
for anyone who's not Canadian.
Yeah.
And we would just show up on these job sites and start asking people questions, trying to figure out what the problems were that they were facing and figure out what we could potentially build to create a business. And I think that scrappiness and that story is relatable to people. Like we didn't do anything all that novel or all that crazy. We just went and looked for problems. And I think that makes people feel, we've heard a few people say, I never thought I could be a founder. I never thought I could be an entrepreneur. And after hearing the Bridgit story, I think I
Mm.
could do it. Like it feels
Mhm.
more tangible, I guess.
You've mastered the market research in a very
Yeah.
tangible way.
So one of the things that I think is super interesting is when you start to ask and figure out about like what was that first customer like? Was it a pilot? Was it paid and all of that? So uh, a few months back, we were talking at Bridgit about, hey, on the roadmap, how do we validate that we're heading in the right direction? So I remember asking Lauren, well, how did you do it on the first customer, right? And so maybe Lauren, if you could talk through like that letter of intent, I think that's a super interesting because companies come to Bricks and Bytes, companies come to me of all different sizes, and especially those folks that are like pre-seed, right? And they're like looking for that first customer. So this concept of like letter of intent, was it a paid pilot?
Mm.
And then the other piece that I think is really interesting that Lauren talks about, like we printed 10 ENR, we printed the ENR list and like put it on the wall. And we're like, we just need one of these companies. So maybe talk through some of that, Lauren. I think that's really
Yeah, great
fascinating stuff.
question.
Yeah, when we first started to hear these challenges around workforce planning and sort of the Excel-based manual methods, we wanted to validate that if we went and put resources behind building a product, is this something people would actually buy? And so we did have letters of intent signed. I think we got 10 before we really felt, okay, this is, we feel strongly that this makes sense. We're clearly seeing that market feedback. And it's not that a letter of intent is binding by any means. It doesn't really mean anything, but it does show that commitment from a potential customer to say, this is interesting enough for me to sign, saying, if you were to build this product that we've talked about and, maybe gone through some prototypes or wireframes of that, we would actually consider purchasing this as a business. So we did go through that process, and that helped us build confidence internally that this made sense and we should invest resources behind it. And then we pretty much time boxed, okay, we have, 3 months to build a beta product, and we had our
Why
dev
was it 3
team.
months? Why did
I
you set up 3 months?
I think we just wanted to make sure that we focused our efforts and didn't, allow this to, keep getting bigger and bigger without getting, more of that validation.
Mhm.
So we really focused in on building that beta product and at the same time going out to the market and getting those early beta customers. So being able to demo what we had as a beta product and show that to some of these customers to say, would you, be a paid beta user and start giving us feedback on what we have so far. And yeah, as Kevin said, we pretty much looked at that ENR 400 list and started, sending emails, messaging people on LinkedIn, and trying to get meetings set up. And it was really through that process where we found those early adopters, those champions that became really crucial to the first kind of versions of the product.
Lauren, what was the product in the first days? Like, what exactly did it do for people?
It was, the core of it was the same as what we have today,
Hmm.
but it was very basic. It was our goal at that point, we kept saying over and over again, is we just need to replace Excel. Um, and so we really focused on the features that we thought would allow people to move away from their spreadsheet and focus, like, move their whole process to Bridgit. And that's actually a really challenging goal to be able to replace Excel. Excel has obviously so
Man.
much functionality. And so it was essentially being able to display people's projects, being able to display all of their employees, all of their team members, and being able to display all of the key attributes around their people that they would look at when placing resources. So is this person willing to travel? Where is this person located? What skill sets or certifications and those things, does this person have? It was much more basic than it is today. Now we have, more built out modules around all of those things. But essentially, it allowed people to have a list of their people and their projects and then show that also on a Gantt view. That was kind of the very early product.
Quick follow-up one. Sorry, Kevin. Just to because I think it's an interesting point to see how you felt about this. But one, how did you know what features to bake into that first project? And were you comfortable with the first product, or were you, there's a saying in the world like you should be embarrassed with your first release, blah, blah. Was it like that for you, or were you actually like, yeah, this is good?
I think I've never gotten to the point where I'm like, yes, we are 100% happy with the product. There's always the things that we know could be better and that we're constantly working to improve. I don't think the beta was any different. Like, we knew that we had things that needed to be added to the product. We knew it was really bare bones. That was intentional because we could only do so much. Was I embarrassed by it? No, because it actually still did solve a business pain. And so even though it wasn't as robust as we, wanted it to be eventually, it was enough for people to start using it and to see value. And because we were partnering with these early customers as like, this is a beta, you're starting to use this product, we want your feedback, this is early stage, like, we were committing to continuing to develop it. So I think our customers knew that this was, an evolution and that they would see those features, as we worked through them get shipped.
Makes sense. Kevin, you was gonna say something?
Yeah, a couple things. Like, first, I think it's insane that as recently as 2018, construction companies with tens of thousands of employees were managing this on an Excel spreadsheet. And I'm sure like 60% or more of your guests are have solutions that have displaced Excel. It's like the easiest thing to attack and build something against. Construction companies love it, but it's it's not collaborative. It doesn't scale. The data gets very siloed and things like that. And so, yeah, it's wild that companies were managing this on Excel. But Lauren, actually, I won't drop a name, but isn't there a company that like boardroom level, they're like, where are our people? And they just didn't know.
Yeah, and I think that's happened with a lot of the companies that we work with. In terms of the sort of pain points that you brought up, these are, company-wide challenges that are coming up in boardroom discussions. Labor, people are the most costly part of their business. And when there isn't visibility into where those, team members are, what projects are they working on, what experience do they have, who's being proposed on the projects that we are pursuing, and does that make sense with the teams that we have? Are we pursuing the right jobs based on the skill sets that we have internally? Are we going after data center projects when in reality we have no people with data center experience to take on those jobs if we were to win them? These are conversations that happen at the board level. And when companies can't quickly show what that plan looks like, where are our team members today? What is the utilization rate by, group, by division? What are the roles that we need to hire? It ends up being a very, fuzzy topic, obviously, and has, caused companies to turn to us for a better solution. So I think that is something that we hear over and over again is, this is not just a problem that one individual in a company is facing. This is a company-wide strategic challenge in terms of how do you best manage and utilize your team.
Yeah, awesome. I know we'll get to it later, but you just released a report as well. And according to that, this is a 2025 workforce planning, state of workforce planning. It says 71% of companies still heavily rely on Excel. So I'll just tease that for now. We can dive
Lots
into
of
that
work.
later.
Yeah.
Go, Martin.
Lauren, my experience with workforce planning comes to maybe 8 years prior when I worked for Skanska, and I remember we had Friday meetings and Monday meetings, and during Friday meetings,
What changed
we
on the Saturday and Sunday?
Yeah, it's a good question. On Friday, we were deciding what we're going to discuss on Monday, and on Monday we were discussing the
what to
workforce.
discuss on Friday.
Yes, and on Monday we were discussing the workforce and next tasks for the next weeks. But that was on the project level, on the project that we were assigned to as a team, maybe of 20, 30 people on site, project managers, site engineers. But my question is, does Bridgit take into consideration this granular, like a site level of workforce workforce management, or does it go to the like a top management workforce planning and management?
I'm almost saying that's the longest question Martin's ever asked on Bricks and Birds.
No, great question. And that is something when you talk about those workforce planning meetings that you would have, it sounds like Friday and Monday, and you're looking at the board and the spreadsheet. I think part of our research process and an ongoing part of our process today is we do try to sit in on our customers' workforce planning meetings to really understand how they're making those decisions today. What does that process look like? And how can we get their meeting to kind of a different level? And I think one of the pieces of feedback that we've heard is that once people start using Bridgit, it becomes that central place to lead the workforce planning meetings from. So they pull Bridgit up on the screen and they actually go through the workforce plan and make those edits in real time in the product and start shuffling people around and making sure that the plan makes sense. So it's typically geared at the operations team. So often it's the VP of Ops who's really in charge of that process and leading that process, in a whatever way today. And they're typically the person that really gets on board to use Bridgit. But yes, in terms of the workforce planning meeting, our goal is to make those meetings more strategic. A lot of the times we join these meetings, and I don't know what you found, but it's a lot of time spent just trying to clean up the data and not having all of the information at your fingertips, and people asking questions like, well, who's worked with this client before? Who's open to travel to, New Mexico for this project? And it's everyone's relying on their memory to say, oh, I think so and so could be a fit for that. I think this person said they might be interested in that. And in Bridgit, you can see all that information on someone's profile, and the system will help identify who actually makes the most sense for a project based on their tenure and their experience and who's worked on data centers before and who hasn't. And so we really want that workforce planning meeting. We're not replacing it. Those conversations need to happen, but hopefully those conversations are much more strategic around, what does our upcoming pipeline of projects look like? Do we have the staff to take that on? Who are the new hires we are making? What backgrounds do we want those new hires to have given the talent pool we have already? Versus, just trying to make sure that the information is correct in the spreadsheet.
Okay. So I previously mentioned a report, which I will say again that we will get to in a bit. But in the report, it says that you're creating a new category of workforce planning. What does that mean?
Well, Kevin, do you want to answer this? I think
Sure.
from, I guess, my quick perspective is when we first launched the Bridgit product, there wasn't a workforce planning category in construction. This wasn't something that people were thinking about spending money on. Workforce planning in Excel was, technically free. And so we had to really go and educate the market on why does, strategic workforce planning matter? What does that look like? How can a software product like Bridgit help the business and solve those key business challenges? But before that, that wasn't really something that existed or that people were talking about from a software point of view.
Yeah, and I would say like the category in essence existed, right, in Excel and in Whiteboard. So there was like this workflow that occurred, but it just wasn't digital, and there was a huge amount of constraints from it not being digital, and that's like the best position to be in, right? It's almost like attacking like a line item on the budget, right, that exists as opposed to like making something up. So the line item was there, and it was being paid with time and inefficiency of this like outdated process. And so when Lauren and Mallory launched Bridgit, there's a reason why they gained so much traction. And actually, I probed Lauren before this call, and I was like, "Hey, do you think you could share some early stats about like revenue figures and things like that?" Because Because when we started, we talked about like, hey, paid pilot. At some point, that transitioned to like an actual like paying customer. But maybe Lauren, if you could talk through like, I think it was like our Future Tech was like the launch in 2019, and what that first like 6 months to 18 months looked like.
Yeah, so we launched the product. We had gone through sort of this beta testing phase with a handful of customers. We had continued to add to the product and get the product to a point where, to your point earlier, Owen, like we felt really confident that we had the features we needed to be able to launch, more publicly. And so we did that launch at ENR Future Tech. I guess that would have been June of 2019. And the growth that we saw was really exciting from that point on. I think we were able to really hone in on this challenge that companies had been facing for a long time and didn't, have a solution to. And so the revenue grew quickly. I think we were at about $500,000 in ARR in the first number of months, and then really grew from there, getting close to 2 million the next year and close to 4 million the year following. And so it was a really rapid growth that we saw. And that allowed us to keep investing, obviously, in the product and in our marketing efforts as well, and really start to tell those stories. As we talked about earlier, this wasn't sort of a budget line item that would have existed before. And so when we went to sell the product, we had to really be able to show this is what you're going to get in terms of ROI or in terms of value. And so having those first customers and being able to do case studies and really show how it was working for another contractor was so pivotal in terms of being able to capture kind of the next group of the market.
I'm going to ask
And what's the
Martin's
most
favorite.
selling?
Oh, go on.
What's the most selling ROI within your
I was
product
exactly going to
category?
ask the same thing.
I think a lot has to do with forecasting. So a lot of the customers that come to us looking for a workforce planning product, often one of the biggest challenges that they're talking about is the inability to forecast. And so not knowing, how many pursuits should we be going after given the capacity we're expecting to have 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 2, 3 years from now? And are we pursuing the right projects? There's a lot of talk around strategic bidding and not sort of blind bidding. A lot of our customers talk about feeling blind when they're bidding work because they don't really know, A, do they have the capacity to take on that project? But B, do they have the expertise? Are the people that they have available at that point in time the right people to make that project successful? And so I would say that's the biggest ROI is, are you actually able to bid more projects or better projects for your business if you have better visibility into the workforce and the people you're going to have available to take on those jobs at that period in time? And that's something that I haven't seen a spreadsheet be able to really give you that information. So we show a supply and demand graph, essentially showing over time, how many people are you going to have available and how many people are you going to need on your projects, and allow you to plan some different scenarios. If you win projects A, B, and C, do you need to go and hire a bunch of project managers and site supers? If you don't win those projects, are you in a position where you're going to have people on the bench and that's going to be costly? And what are those people's backgrounds? What's their tenure? What's their experience? And does that line up with the projects that you're actually pursuing?
And in terms of just like dollars and cents, it's pretty cool. But when you talk about like utilization rates, either you're overutilized, which means your people are stretched too thin, they're going to be burned out and leave, right? They're going to churn from your GC, from your business, or you're underutilized and you have people sitting around wasting money. So like workforce planning has a direct, and labor is the one of the biggest expenses of these GCs with thousands of, with lots of employees. So it really does boil down to like dollars and cents and money that could be tremendous amount of money that could be at waste.
That's interesting. Lauren, what do you think makes like a good like a good workforce planning software versus like what do you think helps to win in a category like this?
Do you mind being more, I guess,
Yeah, like okay, so
I'm trying to think
maybe
of, there's so many ways to answer this question. So I'm trying to think
yeah.
of which path
So
to go
Why
down.
you're successful? Why you are
yeah,
successful?
versus competition, like why does Bridgit stand out? I guess like what is the why would someone use Bridgit versus someone else? Why is it a better product?
I think one of the things that we really focused on early on was we started as an enterprise focused solution. So we really focused in on those large companies with hundreds or thousands of employees and really built the product in a way that would scale with those businesses. And so we've seen really great success in the enterprise category. When you look at the top 20 general contractors, we have half of those companies using the product.
Mm.
And I think if it's the top 150, we have around 60 of those
Wow.
companies. So we've really done well
Monopoly?
at the top end of the market. Um, and I think that does help build credibility when we can say that, a company, Martin like Skanska, uses the product across all of their North American divisions. That really helps to show, this product is vetted, it's going to scale with your business, it's able to support that number of people. And I think that has allowed us to stand out and really show that we are an enterprise grade product.
Hmm. So a
Wonderful.
question to it. So out of these 150 companies, you saying you have 60 and the rest of them are using someone else, or they are not using anyone at all?
Excel.
Mostly Excel, or
Oh,
for a
really?
lot of the larger players, a homegrown solution. So something that they would have built themselves, back when there wasn't a commercial
Mm.
product to go to. And so that can be a bit harder to sell against because it's something that's, typically
They
quite
are invested
ingrained.
in.
They've
Mm.
invested in it. So, bit by bit, I think we are bringing more of those companies on board that have invested in a homegrown tool, but there are quite a few of those still there.
Mm.
Mhm. Is it the right moment to ask about how the artificial intelligence impacted your space?
Sure. It's something that has been a very hot topic. We've had lots of discussions over the past number of months and working on some really exciting um, features in that space. I won't go into too much detail. I don't want to give too much away, but I think the thing that we've been thinking about is we have all of this workforce data within the product. We are, for our customers, this centralized location where they can really understand everyone's resume. They can understand who's worked on which projects, who's worked with who. And that's information that we surface today. But AI is going to allow us to surface so many more insights so much faster because we have that really unique data set already. And so I think that's what we've been really focused on is the last number of years, really building out that sort of workforce data and having that information. And now we're really going to be able to leverage it in a way that when we launched this product initially, we never would have dreamed that the things we'd be able to do today.
Mm. Kevin, I want to bring you in on a question because Laura mentioned something about a lot of education required in the early days for people, and perhaps still ongoing because your mission is not complete by any means. So, what Kevin, what's like how do what when you're working with people, how do you yeah, how do you educate? How do you get the message across?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about this in the past, Owen, that like the secret is having, I think a good product is like the starting point, right? So when you asked Lauren about like why do you think Bridgit is so successful? I mean, first, obviously there was that first to market move, right? So they were able to capture a lot of market share, but the product, because of that speed, there's like a flywheel effect, right? So now they're getting customers, now they have more money to invest in product development. And so they had multiple years ahead of their of any other options, right? And so from a messaging perspective, I mean, the product is just, it's the best in breed option. They are the category leader. And and so now, like you talk about AI, well, they're in the best position to put those type of capabilities into the product faster and more effectively than anyone else. So from a messaging perspective, like it's easy. I mean, when you're working with the company that has the best product, all you have to do is tell the world what the product does, right? It's already like the layup is there. And so when I first started working with Bridgit, like the big new kind of revolutionary entrant into the product was this concept of experience tracking. Some companies refer to it as the internal resume database. And so if you think about it, all the people that work at a general contractor have some sort of resume, and likely it's a PDF stored in some sort of folder system that's basically like dummy data, right? It's unleverageable. There's no context. It's very hard to extrapolate into like anything usable. And so the team at Bridgit said, what if we could take all that and make it actually something that could be leveraged when making workforce planning decisions? And so to your question about like messaging, again, one of the big launches we did was the launch of experience tracking, this concept of internal resumes. And maybe actually I'll just like toss it over to Lauren to talk through some of it, because it is a game changer in workforce planning. It's something that no other workforce planning company is doing. And it's just like that next step of them leading the pack.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Really, those first customers that we were signing on, the goal, as I said, was let's just replace the spreadsheet. Let's just get companies away and prove that they can move away from the Excel or manual methods. And, we signed on more and more customers, and it became clear, okay, we've proven this goal. Now, what is that next evolution of the product? And one of our customers actually said to me, this is great. We're using Bridgit. We have all of our, teams. We can understand utilization rate. We can do all these things we couldn't do before. But she said, what I really want to get to next is understanding, how do we build high-performing teams? How do we make sure that the team we're putting together is the right blend of people? It's the right blend of tenure and experience. And she said, that's really where we now need to focus. And so that was really great insight and part of sort of the information that led to, I would say, what became experience tracking, which is really, as Kevin's saying, surfacing and being able to be that database of everyone's experience within the business. And we've heard so many stories from customers about times in the past when this has been challenging, when they're looking for someone within the company that has a specific type of experience in order to place on a project. And they have to pick up the phone and call 10 different offices across the country trying to find somebody that has that expertise, when they could really just look in a system and quickly search for somebody that has that experience. Or cases where people have turned down projects because they didn't realize that somebody on their team actually had the skill set to take on that job, and so they passed on it. So we've heard a lot of stories in terms of, that experience just isn't captured anywhere. People rely on what they have in their heads and what they know about team members. But there's, information about what somebody worked on previously at a prior employer. There's information that you may not know in terms of the projects that they've worked on. And so we've become that database for that. So the system now will track which projects have people worked on. Is it a data center? Is it a hospital? What's the budget of that project? Who was the client? And so that you can actually understand who has experience in which sectors with which owners, and start to place teams together that really make sense and are the right blend.
Mhm. So for those potential customers who are still using Excel, what are maybe non-obvious items that once you or someone from your team tell them that this is what you get, is the most compelling to them?
The most compelling, I would say, we have a few things. Experience tracking, we already talked about. I think people get really excited when they see the ability to track not just the experience within their company, but experience from a past employer, because that is something that just doesn't really exist anywhere. Maybe in the PDF somewhere of their
Somewhere in
resume.
CV, yeah.
And I think everyone that we've talked to at least has a story of a time when that has impacted them, in terms of placing someone on a project that didn't make sense because they didn't fully understand that person's prior experience, or missing, as I said, missing out on a pursuit because they didn't realize that. So I think that is definitely a big piece. We also have a way of showing who has worked together on which projects. That usually gets a lot of excitement. That is something that team members, without using Bridgit, often put together manually. They actually try to go through and look at who has worked on which projects and kind of build out a matrix to show who's worked together. But doing that all manually, we have a way of being able to show you that automatically in the system, so you get an understanding of who's worked together on which projects. That is something that's really important to people because they want to replicate team success. If there's a project team that was really did really well on a specific type of data center project, they want to try and, do that again. And so being able to surface that, I think gets a lot of excitement. And then I'll go back again to forecasting. Forecasting, I think, is one of those big ticket items that people don't have the ability to do without a workforce planning product. We've seen some companies build their own Excel models and, try to do all of that, but being able to actually bring all of the teams together and understand, what are all of the implications of the different projects that we're pursuing and how does that impact the workforce and the hiring plans. That is a huge piece that companies feel they are missing. And we're able to do that because we integrate with the CRM, we integrate with the HR system. So we're pulling all of that data together and being able to show that within our product.
I got to layer one thing in here, Owen and Martin. So we did this like state of workforce planning report, which we've talked about briefly. And when we went out, we asked companies like how much impact the project team's collective experience had on project success, right? Because project success means they made money, or if it's delayed and it's over budget, like it's unsuccessful. 3/4 of survey respondents, it was a global survey, said it's critical. Like it's very important to the. But here's the juxtaposition that I think is interesting. I went to try to go get some like existing data on project team construction and its impact, right, on outcomes. And the only survey I could find, or the only data point, was from like 1999. And the reason I bring that up is because I actually don't think construction companies have had a good way to measure this. And so that's what's super exciting is like as these capabilities are entering Bridgit, you can actually start to see and build that sort of long tail of data so 3/4 are saying anecdotally yes, it's critical, but there's no data that's like publicly available on that topic. It's like, why is that? And I don't think companies have had the capability to track this.
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
Yeah, I completely agree. I remember my days on construction sites when the only person or team who knew that was a high-level project managers who knew what was the success of particular project and why it was, because they knew the people, etc. But
the team.
Once they move on somewhere else, then it's all lost, gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do they say in any great business? The differentiator is typically the team. And like if you relate that to construction projects and perhaps some other industries, like let's just pick football, for example. Imagine if you split the team up after every match, like you're going to have no success. I know it's a little bit of a simple comparison, but
yeah,
but that's what it is.
And I would also say that that I would agree with what you're saying, Kevin, because people we speak to, one of the key problems about the construction industry is that dissolution of the team once the project is complete. Like everyone gets to know each other, does really well, becomes good friends, has a strong bond, and suddenly it's like never worked again together in their life. Like,
the chemistry's lost, right? And yeah, that sucks. And it's like, how do you replicate that? And I think that's like one of the most exciting things for me that I get intrigued about with what Bridgit's bringing to the table.
Okay.
I'll just add one other thing that I think has been coming up more and more lately, and we've done some more investment in the product to really continue to support this at a greater scale, is companies are really looking at commute distance for their team members. And for some companies, they say that's the number one thing that they're looking at because they've had so many instances of people leaving the company because they've been commuting, 2 hours each way to the job site. And they'll do that for a couple of months and, end up leaving. And a lot of the time that happens just because if you're planning through some sort of spreadsheet and you're relying on people in the room just knowing intuitively who's going to be the right fit for the project, you end up missing situations like that, or you don't consider all of the possibilities. And that matters more in the big cities, in Dallas, where you might be traveling from one end of the city to the other. But one of our customers was joking He was saying, he's like, our current strategy is we want our team members to drive past 3 of our job sites before they arrive at the one that they were working on.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
So that has been something that's come up a lot more with the labor shortage, especially. People are really wanting to make sure that they retain people, and it really comes down to the project that they're placed on. And, does that make sense for where their career wants to go, where their expertise is? And, lifestyle wise, is this actually sustainable for someone to drive that distance to a job site for 3 years?
Cool. All right, Lauren, what people often learn of a thing or two when they're expanding globally. And I know that's something that's been on your initiative of recent times. So what have you learned so far? And how's it going?
Yeah. So we have been expanding and selling our product in Australia and New Zealand, and then more recently in the UK market. So it's been really exciting. Really, how this started was we wanted to look at markets outside of the US and Canada and really understand where else we could be a fit. We identified Australia and the UK as two, kind of, I guess, easier markets to get into. We wouldn't have to do any language translation in the product. And we wanted to validate again. I think it always comes back with us to validating before investing. We want to validate those 2 markets. And so essentially, I flew to Australia. Mallory flew to the UK. We set up a bunch of meetings, cold messaged people and tried to set up meetings and essentially demoed our product, me in Australia, Mallory in the UK, just to see, does this resonate? Is this the same as demoing to a US company? And the good news is it was honestly identical.
That's
The same
strange.
problems, the
Yeah.
same issues. There weren't other products that were, competitors in that landscape
I'll
that
just
were
add
different
something.
than,
Sorry, Lauren, to interrupt you,
yeah,
but that rarely happens. One of the biggest
yeah.
things, pain we hear from people who've like expanded to other regions throughout the world is like how different. Like, whilst you think it's the same from the outside, actually how different the industries operate. So, yeah, I guess well done.
And we had heard the same thing. I think especially with, financial products or payroll products and, different legislations and all those things, we were, definitely hyper aware of stories from other founders where it had been really challenging. But in terms of actual team management, how do we make the most of the team that we have? How do we best position people to win projects, to execute on projects? All of those challenges were the same. People were using spreadsheets, like all of that was kind of copy and paste. And so initially, to start with, we were not GDPR compliant at that point in time. And so we decided to start with Australia and New Zealand. We essentially had one of our team members on the sales side start reaching out to Australian companies and demoing our product, selling our product. And pretty quickly, the first couple of companies in any new market is very difficult because you don't have the credibility. You're not known in that landscape. You don't have the Australian case studies to reference yet. So you have to reference the US ones, which, isn't quite the same. So the first few companies were challenging. We had to really find those early adopters who wanted to come on board as early Australian customers. But then word started to spread, and now we do actually get referrals from Australia. People are talking about Bridgit. We've gone to different events in Australia. And so that has grown over the last number of years. And then the UK is actually more recent. We became GDPR compliant at the end of last year and then really launched in that market as part of that. So
Awesome.
we're still early days there, but essentially doing the same strategy and same process.
Quick follow-up to this. Would you say that the strategy would follow landing some large logos within these regions or not really? Because typically people say, right, try and land some big logos in your early days. And if you're launching a startup and build out from there, does that happen when you're going for global expansion or can it be a little bit more organic? I don't know if that's the right word.
I think it's a bit of both. We definitely have a target list within. So when we went to Australia, we had a target list of companies that we wanted to focus in on. We also did have customers that we were already selling to in the US that would have had either Australian or UK presence. And so that was also something that was pulling us in both of those directions, are these, global companies that wanted to use the product across all of their divisions. So we had some different inroads there. But really it was we just need customers. We need companies that we can, bring into the product, that we can show success to, that we can start to have those proof points in the market, and then have, better sort of materials and information to share that's going to resonate better than, the case studies of our American customers.
Cool. For both of you, is there any lesson or successful like messaging strategies for the international expansion when you try to like hit the customer with the right message for them to agree for a meeting, or that wasn't a problem?
You just have to do it in their accent, the local accent.
Of course, yeah, definitely in their accent. One thing I will say, like one of the experiences I picked up at Autodesk was like we had localization folks, right? So we had PMMs that were in Ireland and in Germany, and we had PMMs in Australia and Singapore. And like the number one thing that will get you the boot is if you show up with like the wrong terminology. So right, so like we've talked about this as well,
Yeah.
Owen, around like tenders.
I love the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, so like if you're talking about bids and you're in Australia and they're talking about tenders, they're gonna just immediately discount you because everyone wants like the thing in their, what
Language.
they're accustomed to.
Mm.
And so I'd say terminology is like the easiest one to pick on to get the boot from. And then the other is like the context, right? So there's like some HR nuance in the UK around how they staff projects and sort of their involvement, which is slightly different than North America, but it's like so subtle and nuanced. But if you miss that context, now you're in a meeting and you're not the subject matter expert. And who wants to, buy from the person that's not they want to be shown best
Yeah.
practice, right?
Great points.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm just thinking for time, we should go on to the 2025 workforce planning. So, what surprised you most about the results?
I can
You
say,
go first, Kevin.
sure. I think there was a stat that 42% of, so first off, it was a global survey, right? So it wasn't North America alone. It was Australia. It was into Europe, and it was a global survey. And
Maybe actually, Kevin, that's a great point. Could you just give some context to the survey? Like what are the
Yeah, how many people or companies?
yeah, like what was the purpose?
yeah. So
blah, blah, blah.
basically, we wanted to like know what the state of workforce planning was, right? So Bridgit has a tremendous amount of internal data, and their customer base is, I would say, quite representative as a proxy for construction overall. Especially with when Lauren talked about the penetration with these large GC firms and they have global presence, things like that. But we said, well, hey, let's like not have blinders on. Let's go do a true survey, global survey. And so we went to hundreds of companies around the world of all different sizes. Obviously, like we had some constraints. So GCs with tiny revenue wasn't really considered. But so we went out and we put together our best attempt at figuring out the things that we thought might be interesting and really capture, the state of workforce planning. And you hear about the labor shortage all the time, so we didn't want to beat that topic to death. Really, that's pretty much like table stakes. Everyone agrees there is a labor shortage. So how can we like go the 2.0 of that conversation and really understand? Okay, with that in mind, how does that impact workforce planning? So that's kind of like a little bit of history, I guess you could say, on the survey. It was in market for quite a while to like capture all of the data. And and then from that we analyzed it, we interpreted, and we put out a co-branded survey.
Nice. Okay, what surprised you the most?
I was gonna say, like, I mean, this is it surprises me that it's a reality, which is that 42% of GCs can't take on new projects because of workforce constraints. I mean, imagine like you have the demand, but you can't answer it. And I know anecdotally from Lauren's travels this to be true as well. But I don't know if it's like surprising as much as just like that seems like how can you have a bit getting demand is the hard part, you'd think, right, in running a business. And but they have the demand. You talked about data centers before the call, Owen. Like the demand is there.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree anecdotally as well that that would be the case. What maybe is also interesting is a bit of a sidestep as material is now becoming a major issue. And we covered yesterday that Schneider Electric has some facts for you are booked out until 2030, not taking any more orders. So if you need
That's
Wow.
parts for
crazy.
your data centers, good luck.
It's terrible.
Lauren, how about you for surprising?
Such a limiting belief.
Hmm.
Well, one of the stats in the survey was the percentage of companies that plan to invest in workforce planning in the next, I think it was year or a couple of years. And that was a crazy high number. And that was just so exciting, I think, to me, maybe more exciting than surprising because, go back to 2019 when we had our little booth at ENR Future Tech and we were trying to talk about what a workforce planning software product was and how was it different than what you're doing in Excel or in your homegrown solution to now, oh, we're planning on investing in this category, in the next year. That is just incredible to me because that just didn't exist not that long ago.
Hmm.
And it shows just how much more potential there is in the market, and how much more we can do with the foundation we already have.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Nice.
What's the appetite of for spending for these companies on workforce planning solution, if that is a thing that wasn't even the case for them before they spoke to you?
There was some data in the report that
Yeah.
so 98% planned to invest in workforce planning in the next 12 months. The other was that
Mhm.
a large portion of them had budgeted out like over $100,000 or more to dedicate to workforce planning. So it's not a trivial amount. They're like putting their money
Hmm.
where their mouth is to get a handle on their workforce.
That's very
Mhm.
interesting. Um.
And that's for like a corporate deal for the whole large company, or
It's
for
average.
like.
I mean, they had some like bucketed ranges that they could choose from.
Mhm.
But yeah, over 100,000. And yeah, for large enterprises, it's obviously more than that. But when you take the long tail of like, towards the bottom of the ENR and smaller, like mid-sized firms, it kind of
Mhm.
averages out. Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I would like to bring this one to the conversation as well. It says companies still heavily rely on Excel, around 71%, despite having dedicated workforce planning software. So people, it sounds like, are using tandem with each other. Um, yeah, what can you read anything into that?
Lauren, do you want to go on that one? I have a perspective, but either way, if you want to take it, I can. Yeah.
I do think it maybe speaks to just how nuanced workforce planning is and how many stakeholders there are. I think that's something we've really learned in rolling out the product, especially across some of our larger customers. There's so many stakeholders involved and so many parts of the business that workforce planning touches, essentially everything. Like the workforce is cornerstone to everything that you're doing, the projects you're pursuing, the teams that you're proposing, the teams you're placing, who you're hiring. And so, I mean, we want that to be lower. Obviously, we want to make sure that people are in the product and like solely in the product. But I do think there's an element of just how complex workforce planning is and how many people are involved in that process that maybe that's my theory in terms of how, spreadsheets and other things could be at the sort of on the side of it.
I have so I agree with that, and then I think there's like another piece of it, a theory, I guess you could call it, a perspective. I think a lot of folks are answering that they have a dedicated workforce planning tool, and what they mean is they just have an Excel spreadsheet.
Oh,
So
maybe.
yeah, so I think a lot are going back, like Lauren talked
No, no,
about.
no. Wait, Kevin. It's not just an Excel spreadsheet. It has macros in it too, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now
Then it
it's hooked
becomes
up
a
to.
tool.
Yeah. There you go. So now it's connected to ChatGPT as well. So it's like it's AI enabled, of course. But I think we talked about the penetration to like let's say the ENR 150, the 150 largest GCs in North America, and it's a substantial by a wide margin. Bridgit has the largest market share, and they're the category leader in the space. And it's like, okay, well, where are those companies if they're not using Bridgit? Well, a lot of them are using those proprietary like homegrown tools Lauren talked about, and mostly they're powered by Excel. So I think when we did this global survey, like that was an interesting piece there's definitely some like juxtaposition there that we had to like read through and figure out. Um,
Mhm.
and the other one too is like when you looked at the data from Australia, when you looked at it from Europe, North America, different regions in North America, like breaking the US, breaking into different regions, breaking Canada out of it. Like the stats were all like 1 to 2% within each other. Meaning like it
Mm.
wasn't like you saw these wide variances that no, Europe's thinking about it different or Asia's thinking about it different. Like
Mhm.
carte blanche across the board, the data was like directionally all very much aligned.
Good stuff.
Okay.
Validates the results then.
I wanted to touch on one more thing, which is charging. What is the right way to charge companies for Bridgit? And maybe you can give some feedback of how did you come up with the current way of charging?
So we look at a per profile or per resource cost in terms of our pricing model. So it's not how many users are in the product, it's how many people are you actually managing in the system? How many
Scheduling.
employees do you have that you're moving between projects? And the reason that we focused in on that, I mean, that's fairly typical for sort of HR systems or workforce planning products in other industries, but it really shows the scale of the business in terms of, are you a company with 5,000 employees that you're managing within the system, or are you a company with 100 employees? The number of users doesn't go up as drastically, so it doesn't capture the scale in the same way that just the number of employees would, and therefore the value that they would get from the product. So that's how we've priced the product, and that has resonated well with the customers that we work with.
I'd say it's sensible as well because people can then people have an overhead per like head count, right? So they're able to easily bake that in to that calculation.
And
On
this
that
has been since the origin, or you've kind of modified this?
That has been the pricing model since the beginning. There's obviously been, tweaks and changes to the actual price point, and as we've added more and more to the product and it's become more robust, the price is different than it was when we launched.
Mhm.
But the model itself, in terms of how we look at pricing, has stayed pretty consistent.
And
I,
that was because you kind of inherited it from different industries, right? Is that the right way of putting it?
I mean, maybe to a degree, but I think it was also something that we were really validating in those early days with those initial companies that we were working with, and really figuring out how they would be thinking about it, what makes sense when they would be kind of looking at their budget. So I would say it was very much market driven as well.
Okay.
I would say the interesting thing though is that when people spend money with Bridgit, if you check back with them a year later, they're spending more. And it's not because the price went up. It's because they're getting enough value that they right. That would be the easiest one, right? It's like, oh, the price went up. No, it's because they're getting enough value. They're getting enough value that they want to add more people into the system and track a greater portion of their workforce. And so like obviously I've worked with lots of startups, but like one thing that Bridgit does exceptionally well is the enterprise sales motion, right? So to go to like a national rollout or an international rollout, right? Which was we didn't touch on this, but was some of the driver to expand as well. Was like there were customers who had offices in Europe, and it was like, well, we need to support their global workforce planning strategy, right? So that was sort of the pull there in some respect. But yeah, customers like spend. If you look at it over time, they spend more because the value's there. And I would say like if you look at startups, that's kind of important, right? If they're
Yeah,
canceling, then obviously there's no value. So
we do. We do a separate one specifically on go to market. I got a last question from me. Is timely, and I saw a good post about earlier today about the great culture within Bridgit. So Lauren, how do you create a great culture?
It's $1 million question. Um, I think for us, culture has really come down to how do we make decisions as a company, as a team. And I think for us, we talked about the strategy that we've put in place and really focusing our team and our resources where we believe we can drive the most impact. I think having that really clear strategy, and we talk about it all the time, we're always coming back to it, has been really instrumental in building a culture where the team understands why we're investing in certain things, how to make decisions, how to weigh the different options and make those tough trade-off decisions, and just really having clarity and visibility into why we have to say no to some things and why we want to overinvest in other things has been a really strong sort of foundation for us to build from. And then I think the other piece that we've focused on a lot is just visibility and transparency into those decisions. There's always things that we have to say no to, and really challenging decisions where we have to say no to, either going in a certain direction or building certain things or focusing on something, hiring a specific individual. And I think really being open with and, gathering feedback from the team in terms of this is why we're going to make this decision and invest here versus there builds trust in terms of, people understanding the trade-offs that we're making as a business and where they can add the most value to the business. So I think that's something that has been a big piece of us as a company. I think the other piece is we're a very low ego team. I think Mallory and I both, started this business when we were college students, and we don't know what we don't know, and we've been learning as we go, and we've hired lots of people with tons of experience, and we just have a very low ego culture where it's kind of check your ego at the door, and we're here to make Bridgit the most successful we can, and it doesn't matter if it's my idea or someone else's. We want to be collaborative, and I do actually think that changes the tone in terms of the conversations that we can have and sort of the willingness for people to speak up and to voice their, opinions or concerns.
All right. Lauren, Kevin, thank you so much. Anything you want to plug? Free plugs at the end.
Free plugs. Go spend money on Bridgit.
Love it.
Yes, please reach out.
Do that.
And I've been spending a lot of time with customers. I'm always happy to chat with anyone, hear different stories and perspectives. So feel free to reach out.
Sure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.